There's something you've been doing for years and never told anyone. You walk into a room full of people, smile at the right moments, participate, answer what's expected of you, and inside, a part of you is already counting down the minutes until you can leave and be alone again. You've never put a name to it. You only knew you felt ashamed because everyone around you seemed to feed off the very thing that drained you. Maybe you recognize this too. A simple question that others accept right away. But in your mind, it never quite closes. It opens another question and another, until you realize you've spent the night thinking about something that, for anyone else, had been settled hours ago. And in the end, someone calls you complicated, overdramatic, someone who doesn't know how to leave well enough alone. This video isn't about personality. It's not about an internet test that fits you into a 4-letter acronym. It's about a specific kind of person who learned, far too early, to live one step behind their own body, feeling everything, observing everything, but never completely there, never fully at ease. If any part of this has ever made you feel lonely in a crowded room, stay with me until the end. Because what I'm going to show you here won't just explain who you are. It will show you that you've never been as alone as you always thought. And by the end of this video, you will discover the 10 traits that, if you have them, make you different from 99% of people. You learn to smile at the right moment. You learn to laugh at the joke even when you didn't find it funny at all. You learn to say, "I'm fine," with a natural ease that doesn't even feel like a lie anymore. I know this isn't hypocrisy on your part. It's survival. Most people never needed to learn this dance with such care, because most people never felt like the world around them required constant translation. You do. You always have. Some of us grew up understanding, without anyone ever having to say it out loud, that being exactly who we are, at the intensity we are, makes people uncomfortable. So we learn to dilute ourselves, to laugh a little quieter, to hold back the question that would make everyone uneasy, to pretend we didn't notice what we clearly noticed, because noticing too much frightens people too. And here lies the contradiction that no one told you in time. This ability to adapt, which seemed like intelligence, like maturity, like the most responsible thing to do, was actually the first brick of a prison you built yourself, brick by brick, smile by smile, without realizing it. Because the better you get at looking normal, the further you get from who you truly are. Maybe you recognize this in small gestures, in the way you reprocess a conversation hours after it ended, dwelling on every sentence, every pause, every look that lasted half a second longer than it should have. In the exhaustion that hits after a social event, not physical tiredness, but another kind, as if some part of you had been used to its limit and needed to be put back into place. In the strange feeling of being surrounded by people who like you and yet feeling like no one there actually sees you. Most people would call this shyness, social anxiety, drama. You've probably heard those words, or worse, you've probably used them to explain yourself because you didn't have a better name available. But what you feel isn't that. And it is precisely about this non-name that this video exists. There is a contradiction in the middle of all this that almost no one stops to examine. You learn to adapt precisely because you are too sensitive to ignore other people's discomfort. And it is this same sensitivity, so well trained in taking care of others' space, that left you going years without taking care of your own. What looked like empathy, what looked like kindness, was also, silently, the way you learned to erase a piece of yourself in every conversation. Nobody calls this self-destructive because from the outside it just looks like good manners. But on the inside, there is a cost that accumulates without anyone noticing, including you. Because there is an explanation, and that explanation doesn't come from self-help or internet personality tests. It comes from nearly a century and a half of people who dedicated their entire lives to understanding this exact kind of inner loneliness. At some point in the last century, a psychoanalyst named Winnicott, who spent his career observing how babies turn into adults, noticed a pattern he called the false self. Not as a deliberate lie, but as an adaptive layer a child builds early on to survive in an environment that didn't have enough room to accept who they truly were. The false self learns to smile at the right time, to read the room before stepping into it, to shape itself to what others expect, because at some point in life, showing the full, true version proved to be far too costly. And here is the turning point. What you've always understood as your flaw, the part of you that tires too easily, that doesn't accept shallow answers, that stays quiet at the wrong time, that feels too much at the right time, is not the false self. It's the exact opposite. It's the true self, still alive, still beating beneath everything you learned to fake. And it hurts precisely because it never agreed to be completely numb. Carl Jung, decades before Winnicott, had described something similar under a different name. The persona, the social mask every person builds to be accepted. The difference between you and most people isn't that you have a persona and they don't. Everyone has one. The difference is that yours never managed to convince the rest of you. It never really stuck. And that is precisely why you feel this chronic discomfort in any environment that only accepts an edited version of your existence. This changes everything, because it means that what you've always treated as a failure in social adaptation is actually proof that a part of you refused to give up. That's not weakness. That's resistance. It's the most stubborn, most honest part of you, still fighting not to disappear beneath the version that would be easier for everyone else to accept. Sigmund Freud, the first to take seriously the idea that an entire life is happening inside us without us realizing it, called this part the unconscious. Everything we feel, know, and carry, but which rarely turns into words, because turning into words requires admitting it. You don't need to agree with every detail of his theory to recognize what he was trying to describe. There is a part of you that knows things before your conscious mind admits them. And it is precisely this part that gets exhausted from pretending, that notices things first, that refuses to accept easy answers, that reacts to superficiality like someone reacting to a foul smell. It's no coincidence that virtually every serious thinker of the last century and a half, Freud, Jung, Winnicott, Sartre, Frankl, each with their own vocabulary, arrived at a similar version of the same observation. There is a distance between who we were trained to be and who we truly are, and the size of that distance determines how much we suffer in silence. Jean-Paul Sartre called bad faith the habit of living entirely inside the role others expect, pretending to oneself that the role is all there is. And he considered this more dangerous than any lie told to another person, because it's the lie we learn to believe on our own. Decades later, inside a concentration camp, Viktor Frankl took this same idea to an extreme level. He observed who survived the unbearable and who didn't, noticing that the difference was rarely physical. Frankl liked to repeat a phrase that had already been circulating for over 100 years from the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. It wasn't about brute force. It was about having, on the inside, a sense of purpose that no one on the outside could see, but which sustained everything. And perhaps that is, deep down, what you've been doing all this time without knowing it had a name, carrying a why that no one else sees, and for that very reason, sustaining a way of existing that the world around you could never properly explain. So here is the question this video proposes, and one I want you to carry with you for the next few minutes. What if the 10 behaviors you've always treated as weirdness, as a social flaw, as being too complicated, are actually the exact opposite? What if they are signs that your mask never convinced anyone, not even yourself? Come with me, because from here on, I will tell you what those 10 behaviors are, and we will look, one by one, at each of these signs. And I think some of them will hurt because of how precise they are. First sign. Silence isn't an escape. It's the only way to turn off the machine. You've probably noticed, an entire day alone leaves you feeling lighter, while an entire night surrounded by people even people you genuinely like, leaves you drained in a way that's hard to explain to anyone who's never felt it. This isn't about whether you like people or not. It's about cost. Every social interaction demands a constant read from your brain. Tone of voice, expression, intent behind the phrase, what the person didn't say but meant to. All in real time, all the time, without stopping to breathe. This comes at a price, and closing the door, sitting in silence, isn't an escape. It's the only way to reset that balance and let your true self breathe without being watched. Notice that this exhaustion doesn't hit everyone the same way. Some people leave a party energized, as if they've just been fed. And then there are people, like you, who leave the same party feeling like they need hours of silence just to recognize themselves again. That's not a lack of social stamina. It's the difference between those who process the world on the surface and those who process it in layers, feeling what lies behind every gesture before even deciding how to react to it. Second sign, you never learned how to stop asking why. Someone gives you an explanation, and in your case, it's rarely the end of the conversation. It's the beginning of another question. Psychologists John Cacioppo and Richard Petty named this trait, need for cognition. The genuine need to think more deeply, not because someone asked you to, but because leaving something half understood is physically uncomfortable. Those who carry this trait to a high degree are often called complicated, or someone who overanalyzes, when in reality, they are doing the work most people prefer not to do, because truly understanding hurts more than accepting the easy version. Third sign, nobody can buy you, and that's always been mistaken for laziness. Some people work well under pressure, deadlines, and external rewards, and some people simply don't. Psychologists Edward Desai and Richard Ryan documented this in self-determination theory. There are people whose motivation is almost entirely intrinsic. They engage when the subject genuinely matters, and they freeze when it doesn't, no matter how much money or pressure is involved. External observers usually read this as a lack of ambition. In practice, it's selectivity. It's the true self refusing to waste energy maintaining a persona that serves no purpose. And there is a part of this that gets even stranger, because the next sign isn't about what you feel. It's about what you already knew before anyone ever told you. Fourth sign, you read what people never said out loud. You walk into a room and effortlessly, you know who is tense, who is pretending to be fine, and who is hiding something behind their posture. There's an explanation for this. High cognitive empathy combined with a keen reading of nonverbal cues. Tone of voice, micro-expressions. A pause that lasts a second longer than it should. The problem is that once you learn to read this, there is no off button. You carry information about people at all times that they never put into words, and that is a specific kind of loneliness nobody warned you would exist. And there's an aspect to this that is rarely said. Reading others with this depth also means you can rarely be fooled by them. But that doesn't protect you as much as it seems. Because knowing someone is lying or hiding or performing and not being able to say it out loud without breaking the social scene means carrying knowledge alone that no one asked you to have. It's a burden that goes unnoticed precisely because it was never verbalized. Fifth sign, in a crisis, you don't explode. You process first. When everything crumbles around you, while others fall into visible panic, something in you pauses before reacting. Not because you don't feel, you do, sometimes even more intensely than the ones who are screaming. But there is a pause there, a moment where you process before responding. Emotion regulation researchers call this distress tolerance, the ability to feel an intense emotion without letting it dictate your next action. It's a skill that takes most people years of therapy to build. You've probably been exercising it long before. You had a name for it. Sixth sign. You've always felt out of sync with your own age. Since you were a child or teenager, you felt somewhat out of place among people your age, not out of arrogance, but because their concerns simply didn't reach you the same way. Maybe you were the child who preferred adult conversations, or the teenager already asking about meaning while your peers were still discussing something else. This connects to what developmental psychologists call early existential awareness, dealing early in life with questions about identity, mortality, and purpose that usually only arrive decades later, if they arrive at all. And this is where things get heavier. Because the next sign isn't about how you feel toward others, it's about how you feel toward yourself. And that's the part most people avoid facing head-on. 7th sign. There's a version of you that you've never forgotten, and that memory hurts. There's a version of yourself that you carry in your mind all the time. It's not a fantasy. It's not a delusion of grandeur. It's a very concrete sense of what you are capable of being, and a subtle, constant, uncomfortable awareness of the distance between that version and where you are right now. Most people make peace with their limits, adjust expectations, settle, and move on without looking back. You can't. Not because you're ambitious in the traditional sense of the word, but because a part of you refuses to lose sight of what it already knows is possible. That distance between who you are and who you could be isn't a flaw in character. It's grief. Grief for a version of you that hasn't fully been born yet, and that you refuse to let die without a fight. 8th sign. Small talk isn't just boring to you, it's painful. Talking about the weather, the weekend, or absolutely nothing isn't just tedious for you. It's physically uncomfortable, like wearing clothes that don't fit and having no way to take them off in the middle of a party. Psychologist Arthur Aaron, known for studying how intimacy forms between people, documented that a significant portion of people carry an almost biological need for depth in conversations. And for this specific group, superficial interaction isn't just unsatisfactory. It drains you. It tires you more than any silence ever could. 9th sign. You made peace with what lives in your silence, and that scares those who haven't. Sitting quietly next to someone without filling every second with noise doesn't bother you. It calms you. Spending an entire night alone without a TV, without background music, without any noise to drown out your own thoughts, isn't emptiness to you. It's peace. And that deeply unsettles those around you, because most people use noise specifically so they don't have to listen to their own heads. You've already listened to yours. You've sat with it long enough to no longer fear what it has to say. 10th sign. You can be surrounded by people and still feel alone in a way nobody else understands. You can have people who genuinely love you, groups that make sense on paper, relationships that look complete from the outside, and still feel like a part of you is observing everything from a step above, never fully inside. Existential psychiatrist Irvin Yalom called this existential isolation. It's not a failure to belong. It's a natural consequence of having a very clearly defined inner life. The sharper your awareness of who you are, the harder it becomes to find someone whose clarity mirrors yours exactly. That isn't loneliness in the common sense of the word. It's the solitude of someone who already knows themselves too well to fake company that isn't real. 10 signs. And if you made it this far, recognizing more than half of them in yourself, there is one thing that needs to be said before any conclusion. None of this comes for free. Continuing to carry this true version of yourself, instead of letting it dissolve into an easier persona, comes with a price. And that price is real. It's not just a figure of speech. The price is that you will continue to feel, every now and then, out of place in circles that everyone else seems to find comfortable. The price is that some people will continue to call weird, complicated, or cold what is actually depth. The price is that growing inside this individuation, inside this process of becoming more and more of who you truly are, instead of who would be easier to be, hurts. It hurts because every layer of the mask that falls off leaves something exposed that was previously protected. There are no shortcuts here. There is no version of this journey that doesn't pass through discomfort. But there is a massive difference between the pain of continuing to betray yourself for decades and the pain of finally stopping that betrayal. The first drains you slowly without you realizing it, until there's almost nothing left of you. The second hurts differently. It hurts like a muscle that was atrophied and is finally starting to be used again. Jung called this process individuation, becoming, over a lifetime, more and more of what you already were in potential from the beginning. Not a brand new version of yourself, but the version that was buried beneath everything that had to be built to survive. He never said this process would be comfortable. He said it was necessary. And the difference between those who freeze in this process for their entire lives and those who manage to move forward is rarely talent or luck. It is the willingness to tolerate the discomfort of being seen, truly seen, unedited, even knowing that not everyone will know what to do with it. Nothing said here today is an invitation for you to become easier to understand, more like everyone else, or more palatable to the environment that has always demanded that of you. This video isn't about becoming a different person. It's about understanding that the person you've always been, beneath all the adaptive layers, never needed permission to exist. This isn't about making yourself special. It's about understanding that the discomfort you've felt your whole life, trying to fit into a mold that was never designed for you, was never a defect of yours. It was the most consistent proof that there is inside you a part that refused to disappear, even when disappearing would have been much easier. You don't need to leave here with a plan. You don't need to decide today to change your behavior, cut ties, or declare yourself different to anyone. That isn't the proposal. The proposal is quieter than that. The next time you feel that exhaustion after pretending to be fine, that urge to stay quiet when everyone expects noise, that feeling of being a step above your own life, maybe you don't need to call it a problem anymore. Maybe you don't even need to call it by any name at all. Sometimes relief doesn't come from sticking a new label over the old one. It simply comes from stopping the fight against your own nature just to fit into a space that was never built for your size. It comes from allowing the tiredness after socializing to just be tiredness, not a character flaw. From allowing the question that keeps coming back to be just a mind that respects the truth too much to accept a half explanation. From allowing the loneliness inside a crowded room to be recognized without rushing to solve it. Maybe the question you've been carrying up to this point was never, why am I like this? Maybe the right question has always been, how much longer am I going to keep apologizing for a part of me that never did anything other than try to survive with honesty? If you made it this far, something in this video touched on something real, and that, in itself, says more about you than any personality test ever will. If this video made sense to you, leave a like. It helps this message reach more people who also never had the words to describe what they feel. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, now is the time. Now I want to ask you for one thing in the comments. Not an opinion about the video. A short sentence about you. Right. I was never the problem. Just that. If it's true for you, write it. It will be more important than it seems. For you and for whoever reads it later. And if anything here left you thinking about everything you hid from yourself just to be accepted, there's another video on the channel that goes straight to that point, about why we keep choosing, without realizing it, the same repeated pains. It's right here. And maybe it's the next missing piece.